What if everything you thought you knew about faith, fame, and truth was just the beginning? What if one of Hollywood's most iconic stars, someone who had it all, found herself searching for something the world couldn't give? This isn't just a story about Angelina Jolie. It's a story about awakening, about courage, about a spiritual journey that defies the headlines and touches the heart. Stay with us because what you're about to hear isn't just news, it's a message. And by the end of this video, you may just find yourself seeing life and faith in a whole new light. Angelina Jolie has always been more than just a Hollywood star. From early in her career, she stepped beyond red carpets and flashing cameras to stand alongside some of the world's most vulnerable people. Her journey into humanitarian work began over 2 decades ago when she visited refugee camps around the world as a goodwill ambassador for the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. What she witnessed changed her forever. The suffering of families torn apart by war, displacement, and poverty stirred something deep within her heart. Jolie wasn't content with simple charity appearances. She immersed herself in the cause, visiting conflict zones across Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. She met widows who had lost everything, children who had never known peace, and communities surviving against all odds. Her activism was real, personal, and driven by an unwavering sense of responsibility. She didn't just lend her name. She gave her time, her voice, and her resources. Throughout her travels, she frequently found herself in Muslim-majority countries such as Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, and Pakistan. Here she encountered the beauty, resilience, and faith of people living through unimaginable hardships. She saw how Islam gave dignity to those enduring despair, how faith sustained families through trauma. These experiences planted seeds of respect and curiosity within her, shaping her view of Islam far beyond what media headlines portrayed. Angelina Jolie's humanitarian work also reflected deep empathy with the principles of justice, charity, and compassion, values central to Islamic teachings. Without even realizing it at first, her heart was aligning with the spirit of service and mercy that Islam honors so highly. Over the years, this connection grew stronger, laying a foundation of understanding that would later influence her personal spiritual journey toward Islam. Behind the fame, success, and public image, Angelina Jolie was living a quiet inner journey that few people ever saw. While the world knew her as a bold actress and a fierce humanitarian, inside, a deeper transformation was taking place. Over the years, Jolie began searching for meaning beyond the material success Hollywood offered her. She had witnessed too much pain, too much injustice in the world to believe that life was only about fame, fortune, and status. This spiritual yearning did not explode overnight. It grew quietly, slowly, through the moments she spent among the forgotten and displaced. In refugee camps, war-torn villages, and struggling communities, Jolie saw a kind of faith and resilience that stirred questions inside her. How did people who had so little, who had lost so much, still smile with hope, still pray with gratitude? These questions lingered in her heart long after the cameras were off. Angelina's spiritual journey was not dramatic or public. There were no big interviews or announcements. Instead, it unfolded in silence, in private reflection, and in long conversations with people whose lives were guided by something greater than themselves. She read, she listened, and she observed, absorbing the wisdom she found in different cultures, particularly within Muslim communities where faith was not a theory but a living reality. The noise of celebrity life could not drown out the quiet call she felt growing inside her. It was a pull toward humility, discipline, compassion, and truth. Step by step, Jolie was moving away from the shallow distractions of fame and closer to the deep waters of spiritual discovery. This silent evolution, carried out away from the spotlight, was preparing her for the day when she would no longer just admire Islam from afar, but embrace it with her whole heart. Every journey has a turning point, an invisible line that once crossed changes everything. For Angelina Jolie, that moment came not in a grand hall or quiet chapel, but in the dusty, broken places of the world where faith shines brightest. During her humanitarian missions to Muslim-majority countries like Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, and Pakistan, Jolie began to see something she couldn't ignore. A quiet strength in the people, a deep sense of peace in their eyes, and a connection to God that wasn't shaken by suffering. She had met mothers who had lost children, fathers who had lost homes, entire communities living under the shadow of war. And yet they prayed, they hoped, they endured. There was something extraordinary about the way they carried their pain. It wasn't bitterness or despair. It was patience, it was dignity, and it was faith. This awakened something within her. It was no longer just about helping people. It became about understanding what helped them survive, what gave them hope when the world had turned its back. In a tent in the middle of a refugee camp or beside a mother cradling a sick child, Jolie saw that Islam was not just a religion. It was a way of being. It was compassion in action. It was surrender to God's will with grace, even in the darkest moments. These encounters stayed with her, playing over in her mind long after she had returned to the comforts of her world. There comes a time when witnessing something over and over shifts from observation to transformation. For Jolie, the prayers she heard, the faith she saw, and the love that was shown by Muslims in their most vulnerable moments became a mirror, reflecting back what her soul had been searching for all along. There is a silence that lives inside people who are changing, an inner world filled with questions, realizations, and whispers of truth. For Angelina Jolie, that silence grew over the years as she walked through war zones, embraced wounded children, and stood beside grieving mothers. All the while, a quiet transformation was happening in her heart. But she kept it private. In a world that constantly watches and judges, speaking about faith, especially Islam, can feel like standing on the edge of a storm. For a long time, she chose silence. Not because she was unsure, but because she was protecting something sacred. The world had taught her that speaking the name Islam could come with controversy, backlash, or misunderstanding. But inside her, the peace she felt from this growing connection to faith became too powerful to ignore. She was no longer content with admiring Islam from a distance. She had seen its truth, its compassion, and its strength up close, and now it lived in her. When Jolie finally broke her silence, she didn't do it with loud declarations or dramatic headlines. She spoke with calm, with purpose. She shared her truth, not to convince anyone, but because silence no longer served her journey. Her voice became a bridge, not only for herself, but for many who had felt the same longing and were afraid to say it out loud. Breaking the silence was not a press release. It was a moment of spiritual honesty. It was the shedding of fear and the embracing of light. And in that moment, she joined the millions who had found peace not in the approval of the world, but in submission to the one who created it. Her voice, steady and sincere, became a testimony of a heart finally speaking its truth. When a public figure takes a spiritual turn, especially toward Islam, the world doesn't always applaud. For Angelina Jolie, embracing Islam meant walking into a firestorm of opinions, headlines, and criticism. The very media that once celebrated her philanthropy began to question her beliefs. Whispers turned into debates, and admiration from some circles turned into suspicion from others. But true transformation isn't shaken by noise. Jolie stood firm, not out of defiance, but from inner conviction. She knew the world might not understand, and that some fans, friends, or colleagues might distance themselves. But she also knew that peace does not come from pleasing people. It comes from standing in truth. Every insult, every raised eyebrow, every misquote became a test of faith. And each time she responded not with anger, but with grace. But with grace, her decision wasn't about seeking approval. It was about embracing a life aligned with her soul. She didn't argue. She didn't justify. She simply lived her truth calmly and courageously. And in doing so, she showed that true strength isn't loud. It's rooted in faith, dignity, and the kind of silence that speaks louder than any headline. With Islam came a shift, not just in belief, but in the rhythm of Angelina Jolie's entire life. What once felt chaotic began to feel centered. The questions that haunted her in quiet moments started to find answers not through noise, but through divine simplicity. Prayer gave her structure. Fasting taught her patience. The Quran offered her guidance. And in every teaching, she found a reflection of what her heart had always been searching for. Islam didn't add pressure. It removed it. It didn't confine her. It freed her. Her compassion, once fueled only by emotion, now had direction. Her empathy, once a feeling, became a practice. She began to see her mission with new eyes, not just to serve people, but to serve God through people. This clarity touched every part of her being, from how she spoke to how she moved, from what she gave to what she let go of. Purpose wasn't about public approval anymore. It was about inner alignment. Inner alignment. Quotes. She no longer needed to chase meaning, she was walking in it. And for the first time in her life, everything made sense, not because the world changed, but because she had finally found her place in it. When Angelina Jolie's conversion to Islam became public, the media's response was swift and divided. Major outlets scrambled to cover the story, but many did so with a lens of skepticism, sensationalism, or subtle bias. Some questioned her motives, others tried to dilute the depth of her spiritual journey by focusing on the shock value rather than the sincerity behind her decision. Rather than respecting her transformation as a deeply personal choice, many headlines turned it into a controversy. Instead of highlighting the peace and clarity she found through her faith, they focused on the supposed scandal of her shift in beliefs. Some stories even attempted to paint her conversion as a phase or a publicity move, ignoring the years of reflection and global humanitarian work that led her to Islam. Despite these reactions, the truth remained untouched. No matter how much the media twisted the narrative or tried to overshadow her sincerity, the calm conviction in Angelina's voice and action spoke louder. Her transformation wasn't built for headlines, it was built on faith. And even in the face of misrepresentation, she remained dignified, letting her peace and purpose speak for themselves. Angelina Jolie's journey to Islam was not a public performance. It was a private awakening that eventually found its way to the surface. Her message to the world is one of honesty, depth, and spiritual courage. She didn't embrace Islam for headlines, trends, or to follow a crowd. She did it because her soul needed something real, something that fame, fortune, and worldly success could never provide. For years, she had been drawn to the values she saw in the lives of people who had little material wealth but carried great spiritual strength. As she spent time with refugees, victims of war, and communities devastated by conflict, she witnessed faith in action. She saw people who had nothing but still smiled with gratitude and prayed with hope. That touched something deep in her. When she chose Islam, it was not to prove a point, it was a surrender to peace. Her message is clear: spirituality is not about image, it's about truth. Faith is not a brand or a label, it's a lifeline. She reminds the world that no matter how high you rise in society, if your heart is restless, you must seek what brings it peace. Her story speaks to anyone searching for purpose, especially those who feel lost even when they have everything. She didn't convert for the world to see her differently. She did it so she could see herself clearly. Angelina's message is a challenge to the world. Stop searching for happiness in noise and start listening to the silence where truth lives. She is a living testimony that when you follow your soul instead of the spotlight, you find something that no camera can capture: inner peace, divine connection, and a life that finally feels like home. Angelina Jolie's conversion to Islam sent ripples far beyond Hollywood. It touched hearts across continents, cultures, and backgrounds. For many of her fans, especially those who have often felt misunderstood or misrepresented, her decision was more than personal. It became a symbol of courage, openness, and spiritual authenticity. When she chose Islam, it was not to prove a point. It was a surrender to peace. Her message is clear: spirituality is not about image. It's about truth. Faith is not a brand or a label. It's a lifeline. She reminds the world that no matter how high you rise in society, if your heart is restless, you must seek what brings it peace. Her story speaks to anyone searching for purpose, especially those who feel lost even when they have everything. She didn't convert for the world to see her differently. She did it so she could see herself clearly. Angelina's message is a challenge to the world. Stop searching for happiness in noise and start listening to the silence where truth lives. She is a living testimony that when you follow your soul instead of the spotlight, you find something that no camera can capture: inner peace, divine connection, and a life that finally feels like home. Angelina Jolie's conversion to Islam sent ripples far beyond Hollywood. It touched hearts across continents, cultures, and backgrounds. For many of her fans, especially those who have often felt misunderstood or misrepresented, her decision was more than personal. It became a symbol of courage, openness, and spiritual authenticity. In a world where Islam is frequently portrayed through a lens of fear or suspicion, Angelina's journey offered a different narrative. She brought visibility to a faith that is too often hidden behind headlines. Through her example, many began to see Islam not as a rigid system, but as a source of peace, discipline, compassion, and deep spiritual meaning. Her fans, both Muslim and non-Muslim, were moved by the sincerity in her voice and the calm in her actions. She didn't preach or try to convert anyone. Instead, she simply lived her truth. That quiet strength inspired countless people to explore their own spirituality more deeply. Some found the courage to reconnect with their faith. Others began asking questions they had long buried. Angelina's transformation also helped many Muslims feel seen and respected. To witness a global figure embrace their faith with grace and humility was deeply affirming. She didn't just become a role model, she became a bridge between worlds. The impact wasn't just emotional, it was cultural. It was cultural. Conversations opened, minds softened, stereotypes began to crack. Her fans started to understand that true strength lies in being unafraid to follow your heart, even if it means walking a path few understand. Through her decision, Angelina reminded the world that faith is not something to be ashamed of. It is something to be honored. And in doing so, she became a quiet force for unity, empathy, and spiritual awakening across the globe. Angelina Jolie's spiritual journey is more than a personal transformation. It is a beacon of hope for a world that often feels divided, noisy, and disconnected. Her story reminds us that even in the most unexpected places, the light of truth can find its way into the human heart. It shows that no one is beyond change, growth, or spiritual awakening, no matter their background, fame, or past. Brings humanity. Her decision brings a message that uplifts the soul. It tells us that compassion, reflection, and humility. That even someone surrounded by glamour and power can choose a path of submission, simplicity, and sincerity. Her journey proves that hearts can be healed, lives can be redirected, and peace can be found, even in a world filled with chaos. Angelina's story gives hope to those who feel unseen. It whispers to those silently seeking. It offers strength to those walking alone in their own spiritual battles. Her courage to follow what is right rather than what is popular is a rare act of truth in a world obsessed with appearances. She didn't just change her beliefs. She reignited a belief in others. A belief that people can still change, that souls can still awaken, that truth still matters. She reminds us that no matter how broken the world seems, there is still goodness, still beauty, still guidance. Angelina Jolie stands as proof that the human spirit is capable of rising above fear, judgment, and confusion. Her journey doesn't just inspire admiration, it plants seeds of hope. The kind of hope that tells every searching soul you are not alone and the light you seek is still shining.